It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the April edition of Learning Now TV. And you notice I'm on my own today. Sadly, Kate is traveling to the Learning Technologies Conference and Exhibition, and she's up to her eyes in preparation. So I am with you all on my own, and I'll do my very best, I promise. To get going, I just want to thank MediaZoo for their great contribution. Creative graphics, new titles, fantastic. Thank you so much, MediaZoo. You're a talented bunch of people and we appreciate you. Thank you very much indeed. Today's show, let's just talk about who we've got. First of all, Henry Stewart, our oldest supporter who has been sponsoring Learning Now TV since the very beginning. Talk to Henry, catch up with what's going on in the organization, changes in Happy, and a little bit about Henry's continuing philosophy, approach, and ability to deliver against all the odds. Then we have Shanice McBean. Shanice works for Prostate Cancer UK, and she shares some bespoke training and how she has managed to transform engagement at that organization with learning. And Martin Cousins and I pick on a new report, a really big, meaty, important report. This time it's Deloitte's 2025 Global Human Capital Trends Report. We've talked about many others, but I think this is a kind of game changer. It's far more comprehensive than that there have been for the last few years, and they've been pretty sizable. So it's a huge report. We try and get to the heart of it in our discussion. And then finally, I talked to Nisi Ozigbo. Nisi is a change and transformation expert, has our own company, and we're going to talk about where change, transformation, and learning link together and where they're slightly different. So it's going to be a really good, meaty, big, beefy, bouncy show. Enjoy it. It's my huge pleasure to introduce my interviewee today, Nisi Ozigbo. Nisi is the founder of Growth Hut, which is a change consultancy focusing on intimacy and visibility coaching and helping organizations change and transform. So one of the things I'd like to ask you first is, first of all, welcome. It's really lovely to see you, and thanks for coming on the show. It's really good of you. You say on your website that your approach is about storytelling, visibility coaching, mindset work, and strategic change tools. Why is that better than what anyone else might do? Explain that to me.
So it's because it focuses on the individual. So not just the individuals receiving the change, but on the leaders themselves. And what you find with a lot of traditional change management, and I think this applies across the board to everything in the people space holistically, there's this focus on, okay, so what are the 5 steps that we're going to use to get people there? What are the frameworks? What are the tools? But before you even get to those things, so I'm not saying that those things are redundant. Before you get to those things, if you have a human leading the change who fundamentally doesn't believe in it, how useful are those tools going to be? In terms of when they're having conversations with their individuals, with their peers, you can sense that disbelief. And we know from kind of studies in neuroscience, in psychology, if there's not that baseline of trust, everything else goes out the window. You can have the
100%.
best frameworks. So my whole thing is, let's prepare and equip people to embody the change. And then the frameworks and the tools. I believe and I trust in people. We've got educated, capable people filling our teams. The frameworks and the tools is not the issue. but how people show up, how they think about the change, how they think about themselves. If they believe that they're equipped to lead the change, if they believe in the change, those are the areas that need work. Those are the areas that drive maximum value. Hence, doesn't it make sense to focus on them?
I couldn't agree with you more. It's music to my ears. I see. I've been shouting for a long time that if you put processes before people, you end up with bad processes, regardless whether the frameworks are beautifully crafted and written in books by important people. It's people who make people matter. It's people who change. And if you lose that focus, you lose everything. So I'm 100% behind you. I think that's really good. You also talk about leading with presence, purpose, and sustainability. So what does that mean? How would that alter me, for example, if I'm a middle to senior manager in an organization? How would that change my approach? What would I notice differently if you did that? If you came along and you achieved that purpose, presence, and sustainability. Those are the three key words, and I can't even say them.
So the way that would change, again, starting with the person leading the change is, okay, so why are you here? Let's be really, really honest. And I've been in management for some time and leadership for some time. Doesn't look like it, but I have. And one of the things that has really stood out to me over the years is you have to give people the space to be real. Like if you're just here buying your time and you're just counting down to retirement, that's fine. Let's surface that. What do those 5 years look like? So what's your purpose here? What legacy would you like to leave? Is it just, you got over the line with your sanity intact? Great. But let's surface that. Let's not make you pretend to be what you're not. And let's ensure that you're confident having those conversations with your peers. People understand. There's nothing that we have to be ashamed of or shy away from. Everybody has their reasons. It's not everybody who's going to be in the workplace that's like, oh, this is my dream job. And this is not everybody's going to show up like that. If you do, that's great. We can talk about it. But if you don't, that's also fine. We still know that you can do a good job. What does that look like? So having that purpose clear in mind and being confident about sharing it enables you to show up authentically. Authenticity has been used as a buzzword and actually has been misused sometimes in terms of, let's get this person in to puppet our message, and you can tell when somebody's just a mouthpiece for a message versus when they truly believe in it. And I would prefer you had a leader, even if they didn't believe in what they were doing, and was honest with their team about, there are some things that I can see that don't work in how we're going forward. But as a team, these are the skills that I can see within you. And this is our contribution. You're more likely to have a team then that's more galvanized and supportive and true to, like your day-to-day working. And then in terms of sustainability, it also makes it more sustainable. When you're showing up and you're not having to pretend to yourself or to other people why you're there. And I'm sure we've all had it when there's somebody who you're truly friends with in the workplace. Even when you've got a bad day and you can show up in your kind of bad day glory, it makes it easier than having to shoulder the burden of having to pretend. Pretense is a massive burden that is adding to the burnout pandemic or epidemic that we're seeing in the workplace. And if we can allow people to show up as who they are, not only can they show up for longer, but they can show up better as well.
What I say is that people wear masks. They come into work and they put a mask on and they don't take it off till they leave. And it's hard. If you've got a mask on, you're using a lot of energy, creating the illusion, creating the fiction, being someone you're not and being uncomfortable in who you are. So you are absolutely right. And I think it's part of leaders' job is to create that safe space where people can be who they are. Because I also believe, I think you probably do too, that diversity is really important. If diverse views, when everyone just nods and agrees with someone because they're a little bit more important, you never get any ideas, you never solve problems. And goodbye innovation, goodbye creativity. And these things are becoming much more important. So it's kind of touching on a number of things that what you're doing. It's touching on transformation, organizational transformation. It's touching on OD. It's touching on learning, and it's touching on leadership. What is the link between all of those, do you feel? And how do you play that?
It's one of those things that if you don't take the time to kind of step back and untangle them, it can feel like it's a mess. But actually, I believe they're linked in a way that a body is linked, So if you've got somebody who doesn't necessarily know how a body works, and they were to open it up, they would look inside and think, oh my gosh, what a mess. But a doctor who's been trained, who as people professionals, we are trained in how people work and in how organizations function. I believe that we have that clarity. Now, I think the reason why this is even a question and why maybe there's not that clarity in industry is, number one, you've got people who don't really understand people and transitions, or maybe have distance themselves from the understanding. So maybe at one point they did understand people and that was their focus, and somewhere along the line it got lost in translation. And it made sense, let me say, because of the corporate machine, to silo these. So, okay, we'll have a learning team. Okay, we'll have a transformation team. Okay, we'll have an OD team. Okay, we'll have a change team. And at a point in time, I think that was fit for purpose. So probably 10 years ago, when maybe you'd have 3 big changes that an organization is doing, and when there was steady state, it made more sense then. You got your OD team, they'll sit, they'll design, they'll map out what skills and talents are needed for the next year, 5 years, 10 years even. It made absolute sense. Then you attach your learning and development strategy on top of that. Okay, if these are the skills that we're going to have, this is the learning and development. And then you get in your transformation team to work on those changes for 3 years, you're checking in. That made sense. Now we're in a period of continuous change, and it's quite literally by the day. So it does not make sense to be convening your siloed teams, your OD, learning, transformation, every day to come up with a new strategy. What it would make better sense to do is actually to have them working together and to be understanding and continually understanding, okay, so what does the landscape look like today? By a conversation. So it's nothing fancy. It really is nothing fancy, but it's about how can we use this collective excellence daily to make sure that we're supporting ourselves and the teams that we serve, to make sure that everybody has the skills, the knowledge to show up equipped to do the best possible job. So for me, they're now inextricably linked because we're in continuous change. When we're steady state change, it made sense for them to be separate, but now it just doesn't make sense.
Yep, I think you're right. I think that the workplace has to change to adapt to the world we now live in. And it is very, very different from the workplace at the turn of the century. And in some ways, we're lagging behind in transforming organizations to reflect those changes and create a better environment for people to do their work, because it's much more difficult. It's much faster moving. They have to keep going in terms of adapting to new skills, new jobs. We've got AI looming on the horizon, and you can't do that in this. First of all, it goes here, then it goes there, then it goes. No, we just do everything all at once, all the time. I think was the name of a film. Anyway, so let me just finish by asking you, I say, Nessie, I'd like you to come to my organization. What would you do? What is your first step when you confront an organization? How do you work out what to do next?
So there's 2 ways that I partner with organizations, and it depends on their risk appetite. On which one they'll take. So there's one, partnering to do what we've just talked about. So let's look at how your organization is set up in terms of like governance and org structure to support your people holistically. And I'm a change expert. And the reason why I haven't necessarily mentioned change is because, as I've mentioned, we're in a state of continuous change now. So I almost feel silly to call it.
So yes, I think we need some more change. Yeah, I agree.
So just to look at your org structure and to take you through and to understand the dynamics of the teams and to surface some of the things. The great thing about calling somebody externally to do this is oftentimes it's quite political. And if you've got somebody internally leading these conversations, it can get quite tricky, or maybe they don't want to call it as they see it because of those politics. Things will move, things will shift. The power dynamic needs to be rattled a little bit, and doing that internally can be quite difficult and maybe career damaging for some people. So to get somebody like myself in who kind of has nothing to lose and can really tell you in plain English or, just straight talking, this is what you need to do. These are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, these are your opportunities and threats, and then work with you to help you. Okay, and now let's reimagine, how could it look? Not big bang, so it's probably a phased approach. What are some steps that we can take now? And then you bed those in and to go on a journey, but also to give your leadership and the teams the language to explain to your people this process that you're going through, and to facilitate those conversations in a way that, even though I'm very straight talking, is very friendly, it's very humane, because this is what I do, so I'm skilled to do it. So that's one side. And then the other side is the visibility and the influence coaching. So a lot of leaders know how to show up with their comms mask on, So, okay, the comms team has given me 3 sentences to say at the town hall. I'll say those. There's a report. I'll say that's not enough. We are in a period now where leaders need to create movements and cultures around them. We want our leaders to put their monies where their mouth is, and we want them to embody the change that they're asking from us. So how do you do that? What does that look like? And so I partner with leaders individually or as teams like SMT, Exco, to look at, okay, so what does your brand say? What does your SMT brand say? What does your individual brand say? How can we turn the needle in that? And it's things like even, how do you show up on LinkedIn? How do you show up on your intranet? When you're doing your weekly meetings, how are those created? How do you cascade messages? All of those are symbols. These are signs. And essentially, it's personal branding. People sometimes cringe at that word, but I'm very passionate on that. You need to be intentional with that now. Don't leave your teams to guess what you stand for. Make it clear. And I partner with you to do that.
Excellent. That word you used is really important. It's run all the way through the interview, and that is intentional. Be intentional. So be intentional in terms of what you want to do with an organization. Be intentional as an individual and as a leader. I think that's absolutely great. Wise words. So thank you so much, Leslie Ozigbo, founder of Growth Hut. Check it out. There's a link on the page. You can see it on the screen. And a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you very much. Good. Thank you.
Be productive, not busy. Check out my Productivity Blitz course. It's based on 15 minutes each morning and 15 minutes each afternoon. We talk about Pomodoros, E4 frogs, monk mode morning, how to reduce your time in meetings, and how to solve email overload. We had an event last week and somebody said, my productivity has gone through the roof. And again, I was so productive, I got everything done before lunchtime. So check out Productivity Blitz at happy.co.uk or email me on henry@happy.co.uk.
I was thinking it's about time we reviewed another report. And guess what? That's what we're going to do today. Martin was in agreement. And we've picked a corker for you. Martin's chosen the 2025 Global Human Capital Trends Report by Deloitte. We have talked about it since about 2018. So there are 15 of them, I think. It's been going for a number of years. But this one is very different, perhaps to reflect a very different world. And I'll let Martin introduce it and explain why. And don't forget, you can download it. There'll be a QR code at the end, and you should read it. That's my dominant advice. Please read it. It's full of real insights. Martin, tell us about it.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Nigel. It is a massive piece of research. It's an annual fixture, and like you, I would recommend anyone in learning or talent to read it. 10,000 leaders from 93 countries have been surveyed, and I think it really does resonate this year with learning organizations because it has a focus on individual and organizational performance, motivation, technology, obviously AI, the role of managers. And I think if you indulge me just for 1 second, it's worth probably reading the trends out because I think it gives you a flavor of it. So rather than jumping in at a deep granular level, I think what it looks at is kind of painting a picture that is probably one that all viewers would recognize, but may not be tackling some of these trends in the way that it's set out in this report. So we've got creating stability for workers, for organizations to move at speed. Stability, that's an interesting one at a time when everything is seemingly unstable. When work gets in the way of work, reclaiming organizational capacity. Basically, you know, people just spend loads of time doing things that aren't particularly productive. So what can organizations do about that? Closing the experience gap and finding the right people with the right skills. So the skills issue is discussed here, and that no one will be a stranger to that one currently. The human value proposition for the age of AI. So clearly, where does the human and the technology work together most effectively? A new value proposition for technology, reinventing performance management, motivation and what moves your people. And last and not least, and this really I thought was quite interesting, is there still value in the role of managers? And
Yes, that's a big final hurrah, the report. You missed one, which was turning tensions into triumphs, helping leaders transform organizations. So there's managers, it's bookended. Leaders at the front, managers at the end. That's the way the report, and then everything in between. All powerful, powerful trends. All no doubt subjects of books. But anyway, what is your take on the whole role of managers? Do they have a future?
well, it depends really, doesn't it? It depends what your take on the manager is. Is it? I mean, for years, the research has shown that managers seem to be a huge challenge for organizations. That, managers themselves feel like they're ill-equipped to do the job, and organizations feel that they don't get the best out of their people. And, the people managers have a role to play in that. That seems to be like the vicious cycle that's ongoing. It's persistent and it's problematic. So this report is kind of saying, well, what can you do about that? So if you think about the fact that 36% of managers feel they're not sufficiently prepared for the people manager parts of their role, and the same number believe their organization hasn't implemented technology solutions to help perform these roles. So, that's quite, I don't think that would be a surprise. But 83% of organizations say reinventing the role of managers is important. Now, that is interesting because right now there are plenty of people, especially in learning and development, who are looking at chatbots to take on a kind of manager coach type of role. So that reinvention of the manager is, that there's an appetite for it, basically. So what will that look like ultimately? And I think, obviously the rest of the report touches on the relationship between humans and technology, but I think, in some senses, the manager is right at the heart of that discussion, because that could go either way. I think, you could have managers who are given the tools to help manage the team, manage their own work more effectively, so they've got more time for the team. Or you are looking at all individuals in teams having effectively their own AI manager.
Yeah.
At which point, what is the need for the manager?
Well, what they say, Martin, what the answer to that question they say is that the manager's new role, so the manager's old role, which has been taken over by AI, is procedure, implementing in processes, telling people what to do, reviewing day-to-day small stuff. They foresee a much bigger role. So they talk about develop, coach, motivate, and nurture people. Nurture, interesting word. Secondly, redesign work, allocate resources or reallocate resources, another important word, and organize human and machine interactions to drive human performance in the age of AI. And finally, enable agile, strategic, problem solving, and, good word here coming again, innovation. So it's basically the leader, the manager becomes the conjurer, the person who takes all the ingredients, including AI, puts her in a pot, gives it a stir, and brings out a whole new bunch of cookies that wouldn't have become cookies without the manager's intervention. That seems to be what they're saying. How do you react to that?
I just don't believe that the persistent challenge of managers and developing managers and managers being effective, mainly rooted in organizational design and job role design. I just don't believe we're going to get leap from that to what you've just described. I'd come back to that massive interest in reinventing the role of managers. And
Yes.
what I said was, I don't know which way that's going to go. Now, this report has a very interesting kind of positive take on that. But but really, is that going to, managers are expensive. One of the drivers from lots of the other reports available talking about AI for CEOs are basically to drive productivity and reduce cost, right? So managers are either going to have to kind of solve or be a part of the solution to those two challenges, or there's a danger that technology itself will fill the void. That's my concern. I really hope that isn't the case, and I do wonder what then becomes of teams. Are they autonomous groups? They're manager-less, but they're still able to perform, be high-performance groups. I don't know. Maybe that will happen. There are lots of
I hope so.
unknowns, but
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that we get more trusted, performance-enabled, and autonomous teams with a light touch rather than a kind of heavy touch. That's all managers have to do is keep the lash applied to their teams, and that they're focusing meanwhile on building the future and ensuring that everyone's got a future. We will see, Martin. It's very provocative, the report. I think it uses lots of really interesting loaded words all the way through. And I would, if I were running a team, I'd have this report down for discussion and see what people think and how we would respond as an organization. Because it's meaty. It's really meaty this year, isn't it? And it's very few gimmicks, really. It's just meaty data out on the table for us.
Yeah, now I think that's reflected in the conversation that we've just had. I think it is very provocative. So it will, I think, prompt people to have these kind of discussions. One thing I would draw people's attention to are the 3 questions that are posed in the report. And these questions, the report authors say that leaders will need to have answers to. And I think they're really good questions for anyone, especially anyone in L&D. How do I ensure the right work is being done and in an optimal way?
Yep.
How do I access, develop, and motivate the necessary workforce? And do I have the right organization and culture to enable performance?
Excellent. I agree with you, Martin. Really profound, and a lot of focus on a different kind of world and how we can engineer that world to become a good place for work, not a bad place for work. But there's certainly work to be done. Martin, that was a very good report to draw everyone's attention to.
Yeah.
And thanks for your summary. We touched upon it. It's a big, beastie, meaty beast. So please have a look at it and tell us what you think. Martin, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nigel.
It wouldn't be Learning Now TV without Rob Clark. And his Learning News is with us again this month, full of interesting ideas, and he'll be gathering a lot more at the Learning Technologies Conference this week. So thank you for all you do for us, Rob, and enjoy the presentation.
How are digital learning developers showing value now that AI is disrupting the content market? Kathy Hoy has news about a new event for heads of learning this summer. L&D qualifications are on the rise. Recruiter Nick Jones is here with what's behind it. We chat to the winner of this year's Gold Award for the use of AI in learning, a group of further education colleges in central England. Earlier this year, we looked in detail at the learning systems market. Today, we're turning our attention to content and the digital learning market. AI is disrupting this market, and there's much more to come. Learning by searching is changing. Google it and YouTube it is being supplanted by AI it. Where does this leave content libraries? Where is the value of content developers in 2025? How are vendors and L&D teams responding? And where might new opportunities be?
The automation of tasks within content creation and content production is becoming mainstream now. There's still a lot of demand for digital learning content. It's not like AI has arrived and demand has turned off. It's still, it's demand out there. The market's still growing. One of the factors, though, is that understanding what you can do and what impact your available content is having is becoming a more pressing question. Holders of learning and development budgets are having to demonstrate the value that they can bring from the use of those budgets, and obviously the availability of off-the-shelf content is one of those sort of standard areas that people turn to. So I think it's really about trying to understand where that content can be applied, how can it be applied most usefully to the most valuable problems. And rather than just understanding kind of the volume and availability and coverage of those content sources, it's like, well, how are these being used? Who's using them? How? What does that, and how do we understand potential sources of impact in the business from that as well?
There is a new event coming up for heads of learning, the Learning Leaders Summer Forum this July, run by CLO 100. CLO 100's aim is to elevate learning leaders into strategic positions in business, to influence the C-suite and improve learning cultures. And this new event is its latest offering.
Our upcoming event is the Learning Leaders Summer Forum, which is a 2-day residential event exclusively for L&D leaders. And this year's theme is elevating L&D leadership. So we're really excited about this.
Why is it needed, Kathy? There are lots of events. What are you hoping to achieve? What's in it for people attending, and why is it different?
This event is needed because it's vital that CLOs, heads of learning, really understand the business they work for and speak the language. This gives them more influence in their organization, positions them to make real change and impact. And that's why we do what we do. But, I think this event will be a taste of that. But also, like everything else we do in the business, it's all about community as well. So this is an excellent opportunity to get together with other heads of learning for 2 days in a residential event. I mean, who gets to do that these days? And merely making the most of the event. I think having that opportunity to spend real social time with each other, getting to know each other, actually grow your community and kind of build your network as well.
There's an upward trend in the number of people in L&D with a related professional qualification. 70% of respondents to the Work and Salary Survey now report that they have one, with bachelor's and master's degrees seeing the biggest increases. And L&D professionals are placing more importance on them. 87% now say their L&D qualification has helped their career, up from 81% last year.
So qualifications is an interesting one. We only really started exploring qualifications in the survey in the last 2 years. So what we're seeing is an upward trend. We've now got 70% of respondents have an L&D qualification, up from 52% last year. The area that seems to be increasing the most actually is bachelor's and master's degrees. You could include level 7 qualifications such as CIPD in that. We haven't broken out the CIPD data to show just the level 7 because I thought that might be interesting to look at. Perhaps we will next year. But essentially, we're seeing an increase in the focus on qualifications and CPD. And I think that's probably reflective of the overall job market and the uncertainty that goes along with the macroeconomic conditions that we're seeing currently. It's probably also worth noting that there is an increase in the positive view of those qualifications. So 87% of people this year believe that their qualifications have had a positive impact on their career. It was positive last year, 81%, but we're seeing an increase. So an increased focus on and positive attitude towards qualifications.
The Best Use of AI in Learning Award is a new category to recognise how using AI can make a difference to an organisation's people and their performance. The judges are looking for an innovative and creative use of AI techniques, algorithms, or technologies in the context of learning and how sustainable value and business impact is built. The winner of this year's AI in Learning Award, who achieved all this and more, was Activate Learning.
Activate Learning is a group of further education colleges across the centre of England. We have a broad demographic of learner, 14 to 16, 16 to 19, adult and higher education learners.
We've developed a number of in-house AI tools, including AI tutors for students, as well as AI feedback assistants and AI resource development assistants for teachers.
Our AI tools responded to an accessibility need that we had for our online learners that were in the position of learning after shifts and things like that. We took a stab for this award and were thrilled to have achieved and to be recognised for all of our hard work.
A big thank you to everyone who's taken part today and our programme sponsor CLO 100. Learning News appreciates its support. We've only included short clips in today's bulletin. All of the full-length interviews are on the website, along with more on each of the stories we flashed on screen. In the next few days, look out for all of the news from Learning Technologies. There's a highlights programme and interviews with vendors and participants about their priorities and challenges in 2025. That's all from me for now. Thank you for your company.
The Charity Learning Consortium has another interview for us, and they are featuring today Shanice McBean from Prostate Cancer UK, talking about engagement through learning. It's an important interview.
This month's Learning Now TV Charity Learning Consortium interview is with a rising star. Although Shanice McBean has been in learning and development for 10 years, recently moved over to Prostate Cancer UK. And I'm super excited to share her story with you because it is a story that all of us can learn so much from. So over to you, Shanice. Who are you and what's the charity and the work that you are doing?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. So I'm Shanice McBean. I work for Prostate Cancer UK. Prostate Cancer UK is an incredible organisation that's focused on saving men's lives and really improving the playing field for prostate cancer in the United Kingdom. And it delivers a lot of incredible work, a lot of impact. And my role has been to come in and support our colleagues to be the best possible colleagues they can be, focusing on their learning and the development and their aspirations, that kind of holistic learning package. So yeah, we've done a lot of great work over the first year in my role, which I'm really excited to talk about today.
Excellent. Well, I heard that when you first arrived, there wasn't so much of a learning offer. It was quite typical in organisations with sort of click next e-learning and that kind of, not such focused resources. And I'd really love to hear a little bit more about how you've set up Prostate Cancer UK for good results, which are strategically impactful and, sort of that firm foundation. So how have you gone about that, Shanice?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And I think the first thing I'd say is you have to be really staged in your approach. There's limited time in an organization, there's limited capacity. So you have to think, I think, quite carefully about what you start with. So for us, it was really a case of trying to understand what the key issues with our learning culture and learning offer were, and really setting those solid foundations. So when I first started in the organization, I made sure to have quite a few in-depth conversations with heads of department, managers, our leadership team, our people networks, our HR business partners, to try and get a sense of what were the kind of major anxieties in the organization and what people were excited about. And I think that really gave me quite a clear sense of what we needed to do to create a really solid basis to then build an exciting, vibrant learning culture on top of. I think at Prostate Cancer UK, that very much looked like manager competency, but there were also cultural issues, as you mentioned earlier, around kind of, e-learning and things like that. I think the issue that we had with e-learning was that it was so boring, so long, and so kind of in many ways the content wasn't always relevant to the roles that people were actually doing, that it was giving learning a bad reputation. So early on for me, there was a cultural piece there. How do we make people excited about learning? How do we make people interested in their development? And then alongside that, there are also kind of systems things. How do we make the most of our data so that we're really delivering strategic impact for the organization? So I think those three areas were really foundational for our work and have now allowed us to build an offer that's really exciting, really vibrant, but also the key thing is delivers strategic impact.
What you're describing there is a sort of masterclass in consultative learning and development. You've really gone out to your stakeholders, understood the organization that you've just walked into, and that opportunity to kind of, keep your ear to the ground, let's say. Um, how did those conversations go down? What were you actually talking about? Because I think there's a lot of people in learning who are the traditional kind of order takers. Please, can we have another e-learning course? Please, can we go on a course? And yet we're still talking about this. I mean, I've talked about this for 10 years now about how we've taken on board people's instructions, but we haven't had the courage, perhaps, or we haven't had the words or the questions to be able to go out to the business like you seem to have done. What were you talking about in those conversations with your heads of and people like that?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think it was really about being a safe space for people to genuinely talk about the things that maybe they found problematic, were anxious about, thought weren't working so well. And I think the word consultation that you used, and be a consultant in an organization is a really, really key one. And I think what really helps here is the 5 whys. Not really going in solutions focused and not necessarily allowing the stakeholders that you're having a conversation with to drive solutions either. I think really good conversation starts with really getting to the root of the core of what someone's feeling, what their perceptions are. And I guess going in with a really, non-judgmental and non-prescriptive way of having a conversation. So I really just wanted to understand how people were, how they felt in the organization, how they thought relationships were working between managers and direct reports, how they thought the structures were set up. Were they good? Were they not? Were the policies and procedures where they needed to be? Were the processes and systems working? And I think I really tried hard to create just a safe space for people to rant, because that gives you the honest information that you need to then understand what the real issues are, not just the kind of, surface level things. And then off the back of that, and having conversations with a broad spectrum of stakeholders, it allows you to see and have that kind of high level vision where you can then start to think about solutions. And as you say, stakeholders often think they have a solution in mind, and it is important to take that into account. But I do think learning and development should be viewed as we're almost consultants to the business. We have expertise in terms of, what is the best learning intervention to get the outcome, the impact, the behavior change that you want to see. And so we take all of that information and we start to come up with possible solutions to test and to drive that change.
So can you talk us through, Shanice, a little bit of what solution did you come up with? You said you had very boring e-learning, so I'm assuming, but we don't like to assume, but I'm assuming that you changed that, did you?
Yeah, we did. So part of the problem was the content that we were using for our mandatory courses were all off the shelf. And for an organization that's really fast paced, really focusing on saving men's lives, that had its place. But I think over time, what that meant is people's experience of learning, people's perceptions of what learning and training were quite negative. So we had to completely shift that. In some ways, it wasn't even about the content, it was about the experience. And we had to make sure that learner experience was top notch. So some of the things that we did was we brought this learning completely in-house, which took many, many months of development. But I think it was the right thing to invest in that particular project, even though, it's quote unquote just e-learning. We were able to design 4 bespoke courses that were completely branded. So they felt familiar to people, they felt comfortable to people. We introduced some quite fun techniques. So there was our Easter egg called Nigel. And for listeners who don't know what an Easter egg is, it's basically a design feature where you're almost the designer is having a fun interaction with the people who are doing the course, the learner. So in our case, it was a little one of our icons that would pop up when you got a correct answer, and he'd make a noise and he'd pop up and he'd do a little dance and then he'd disappear off the screen. And then we would test people at the end of the course to see if they could spot how many times Nigel popped up in the course. So then what we're achieving is engagement without making it cheesy. It's something that's fun for our business, for our organization. And then we were also not afraid to have really short courses. Our safeguarding course ended up being a 15-minute e-learning because that's what we needed. And we didn't take the content beyond what was necessary for the projects that we were delivering.
I can really see why you won the Rising Star Award this year. So well done to you for that. And thank you so much, Shanice, for sharing with us. Loads of top tips there for all of the people watching Learning Now TV today that they can take away. But for me, the biggest win for you is you've gone in as a consultant, you've really heard your business, and you've reflected back something that they need, which is fun and engaging, and that learner experience that you've talked about. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure to introduce Learning Now TV's oldest, no, I don't mean that, I mean longest standing sponsor, and in the shape of Henry Stewart. Henry has been with Learning Now TV since the very beginning. A double welcome to you. A, because you're Henry Stewart, we want to talk about what you're doing at Happy, and B, because of your long-standing support of Learning Now Television. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is the change in ownership at Happy. Tell me what's happened and tell me why it's happened.
Well, Happy has moved to an employee ownership trust. And an EOT is a trust that allows a company to be owned by its employees. It's a bit like the John Lewis model. So the trust holds the shares on behalf of all and current future employees. Employees don't own individual shares, rather they benefit from the company's success collectively. Yeah. So over my time at Happy, I've had a fair few investors who have come along and wanted to buy Happy. Yeah. But they don't really understand our values. For example, one investor came along and wanted to introduce individual sales commission, which is something that people do. We don't have that at Happy. We have group commission. I checked in with our employees, and many of them would have left Happy. So, and of course, the staff do understand our values. So all our staff now own Happy.
So what does that do to the day-to-day running? Does it do anything, or is it just it carries on, but with a different level of commitment?
We don't generally have a hierarchy at Happy, so I make very few decisions. But the key point is that the Happy staff own Happy.
And are you one of the Happy staff who owns Happy? You're an equal.
I'm an equal
shareholder.
Yeah, and I'm hopefully going to carry on for a few more years.
Good, excellent. And how do you make decisions? Is there a board, or is it?
There's a trust board,
Yeah.
which I'm as I'm a founder, I'm on it. There's 3 employee representatives, and there's one independent trustee.
Yeah, and they make the strategic decisions in terms of direction, investment, that sort of thing.
They do, but actually, most of our employees make the strategic decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and but that's always been the way it's been.
It's
isn't
always
it?
been that. Well,
Yeah.
it's been the way it's been since 2017. When I was on a panel with David Marquette in Copenhagen, and instead of telling 135 crew members what to do, he decided to let 135 crew members tell him what to do. The only thing he asked for is that he would fire the missiles, because that was not the requirement of the staff. So I decided then to come back to Happy and make very few decisions, and it was flatlining then. The sales were flatlining, and in the next 3 years, it went up 25%, 25%, and 25%.
Just goes to show, Henry, that should tell you something.
Yes,
Trust the people.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also tells you something. My latest book is on organizational learning and the power of connection in organizations. You live by that. You demonstrate that on a day-to-day
Oh,
basis.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And knowledge is shared readily and happy. People make decisions together. People feel supported. I ask people in organizations, if I didn't know something, how difficult would it be to ask for help? And in huge numbers of organizations, people say, there's no way I would ask for help. That would be a sign of weakness. No way. In Happy, that would be just a routine.
It would be absolutely routine. Yes. So what we have is we have a culture of freedom and trust where people make their own decisions without any response from managers.
And they're accountable for them. And and when things go wrong, you talk about those and you learn from them. There's no blame around the place. No, I do. And if you go into Happy, which I've done on, I don't know how many occasions, many, many occasions, it's a happy place. I remember when I first met you, Henry, and I said something about Happy, and you said, well, don't believe me. Come and talk to people. Come and talk to the staff. You're welcome. So I went in and I talked to everybody and we had a really good conversation. You exited the room and said they can say whatever they like. And they did. And it was good. And people stay Happy because of the nature of the place rather than anything else.
Yes. Yeah.
It's true,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And we've had, we've only had one person leave in the last 4 years.
Yes. Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And those 4 years include the pandemic as well.
Indeed. Yeah, they do. Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to transition. We talked about that already. So
Yeah.
tell me, what are you doing interesting? Like you mentioned level 7 content and level 7 qualifications. How are you doing that, and what are you doing?
Okay, so this is a level 7 senior leaders apprenticeship. Okay. Now, sadly, the Labour government is introducing the Growth and Skills Levy and is aiming to reform the existing apprenticeship levy by providing employees with greater flexibility, but they're planning to limit or remove the levy funding for the level 7 apprenticeships.
Yeah. Is that equivalent of a master's?
It is equivalent of a master's. Yeah. I like to call it the Happy MBA, but it's not an MBA. But yes, yeah. It will only be in June, and because the government plans to limit or remove that levy, the level 7 funding.
So it will end effectively.
It will end. I mean, I was on a webinar with Gareth Thomas, who is the Minister for Small Business at the Department for Business and Trade, and one of his 4 key posts was helping businesses improve their management capability. And it is true. Several studies have shown that management capability in the UK is way behind the US and Germany. Corporates can spend 14K on a level 7, but SMEs can't. So I did an email to Baroness Smith about this, who is responsible for the Growth and Skills Levy. about if SMEs could do the level 7, but she didn't come back.
Is there anything you're going to take from that process? So if it stops in June, rather than just abandon it, are there any elements of your practice in the organization that you will take forward, and anything you will be able to offer organizations in the spirit of the level 7?
Our clients have talked about this. So, for instance, the Stroke Association staff engagement score is now at 88% with year-on-year
Whoa.
increases since 2020. I'm able to input into decisions that affect me and my work. 74% agreed or strongly agreed. So that was a delegate on the course. This course is inspiring and has revolutionized how I lead. As Hannah Beers, head of Littlegate Farm. My organization has extended rapidly. I genuinely believe I wouldn't have had the confidence or skills to lead my team without this apprenticeship. It's given me a drive, a power, and braveness I didn't have before. And as Alan Castro, area manager at Advanced Technology Services, says, I gave my team more responsibility and trusted them to do their job. I don't step in and take over. Instead, I allow them to stumble and learn, ask questions with intention to listen and change my opinion. So this is very much about the culture of freedom and trust. And it's very much about, charities, social enterprises, SMEs, and they would not be able to do that.
No, I accept that. But what you're actually developing is not just a vanilla management program. You're actually developing a particular philosophy and a level of engagement, trust, and autonomy that you're saying, and you're demonstrating it, that actually delivers massively for small organizations. Because small organizations, even if they're only small and everyone knows each other, that doesn't mean that there's a level of trust or a level of autonomy. They can be micromanaged to the nth degree.
Yeah, absolutely. They can be. So what we do is a culture of trust and freedom where people make their own decisions. Absolutely.
So that will continue. You will try to do maybe not such a comprehensive program, but that philosophy will continue going forward.
Oh, it will absolutely continue. So we have a 4-day flagship program, based across 3 months, where people come back and tell us what they've come up with. Yes. So we would, and there's also a Bravo program for women's leadership, which is across 12 months. So yes, we very definitely will do all of that.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that, because I think if you look back on the level 7, the Happy MBA as it was called, if you look back on that, that was a massive learning curve for each individual who participated, but a massive learning curve for Happy too, because the process, the action learning that you built into the process would have taught you a huge amount about motivation and development, and the power of motivation and development.
Yeah, and absolutely, and we will be doing stuff with that.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. So I wish you luck. So new ownership, new programs,
Yes,
and a new Henry to carry on.
Indeed.
Excellent. Yes, all good news for me. And again, just a thank you for all you've done to support us. And I wish you luck. I think you're an important part of the iconosphere of the environment around L&D, and you probably influence more people than you've actually taught or developed yourself. And that's really important. That influence will continue. I hope you'll write it up. I hope you'll share some of this stuff in a book of some sort or some communication, because it would complement all the other things you've written.
Yes, yeah, I've written, as I said, 10 years ago, I wrote the Happy Manifesto, but I've also written Creating Joy at Work, 501 Ideas for Creating Happy Workplaces.
Excellent. Good. They're both available. Are they on the website?
They're on the website, and they're also on any bookshelf, on any booksellers.
Yeah. Maybe the next one is Happy Managers, developing something to do with management development, creating liberated leadership. That's it. Creating liberated leadership. Henry Stewart.
Absolutely.
Happy
No,
Company.
that's great fun. Yes.
Great idea. Henry,
Yeah.
thank you so much. It's always good to talk to you.
Cheers.
Take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. Lots of really interesting material this month, as usual, but I think particularly this month. And I think there's something that links all three of the main interviews today, and that is about change and transformation. Those two important words. So we're getting beyond L&D as a catalog, L&D as something nice to have, to L&D as at the heart of change and transformation. And that's extremely important, I think. So I hope these interviews will resonate and will last beyond the duration of this program. I think there's material here that you can draw upon in the months to come. Here are some upcoming L&D events. There's always really interesting things to attend, stuff to register, and information to be gleaned. The first one is the World of Learning AI conference on the 20th of May in London. That is about a focused one-day conference from World of Learning. Well worth having a look at, checking it out. The second is the HR World Summit in Lisbon, Portugal on the 20th and 21st of May. So if you're into Lisbon, Portugal, and HR World Summits, it's definitely for you. And the AITD conference, which is in Melbourne, Australia on the 21st and 23rd of May. It's not too late to book a ticket for Australia. AITD Australia is always engaging, interesting, local, and really puts its finger on the pulse of learning and development Australia-wide. So if you can't get there, go onto the website, have a look at it. If you can, I'm sure you'd be made most welcome. And the CIPD Festival of Work is on the 11th and 12th of June. It's in Excel, London, so pretty much the same place as Learning Technologies this year. And there's also Learning Live AI Edition, which is on the 26th of June, run by the LPI. There's a kind of running theme here. Those two initials seem to have popped up a number of times, but all worth catching, all worth registering in your calendar. So thanks very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. I'll be back next month, as will Kate, to do a more professional job for us. Thank you and enjoy the whole month. See you soon.